Okay, look, I spent a lot of time alone as a kid. My mother worked and my dad was elsewhere, but my mom's best friend kept an eye on me since she didn't work. It was in this crucible of boredom that I was exposed to a lot of video games. While my caretaker slept during the day, on weekends, and over the summer, I was left with the company of her prodigious collection. Her nephew was an avid gamer whose circumstances put him on the frontier of gaming in the 90s, so whenever something new and shiny was released, she would be gifted the now obsolete toys of the past. She'd always said she got them for me, but in retrospect, now that I think about it, there were a lot of signs that pointed to her being a ravenous gamer herself in a time when it wasn't really normal to be an adult video game like her. The Sega Genesis was my favorite console among these that made the rounds there, and I had one of my own at home, but her collection was much broader than mine. She had a Nintendo Entertainment System, but I somehow managed to not once hear about Castlevania until I encountered this game on the Genesis, and it would forever change how I looked at the medium. It had this striking style and gore-slick smoothness to its gameplay that impressed itself into my head flesh like the seed of a horror-core vampire tree that would not blossom for almost 30 years. Castlevania Bloodlines, or Vampire Killer, or Castlevania The New Generation, depending on where you live, is definitely my favorite game in the storied Castlevania franchise, even after spending quite a lot of time in that realm recently. Its release on the Anniversary Collection in 2019 reignited in me a passion for whipping corpses that I had thought long buried by electroshock therapy. This game f***ing rules. You thought this show where I talk about things I like would only be about terrible stuff? You fool. You absolute maroon. No! Bloodlines is perfect. No notes. Pack it, ship it, deliver it straight to my quivering neurons. 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10. I even think the parts where this game slows down because of the stress on its memory are cool and cinematic, and I wouldn't change a single thing. But maybe I'm burying the lead here. In the year 1994, Konami was given the challenge of creating a Castlevania game for a Sega console for the first time. And it was decided that it would be a no-frills Castlevania's Castlevania while still adding some intensity and edge that the Genesis was known for. 2 years prior, Super Castlevania 4 released to tremendous success on the Super Nintendo, and it was very much the template upon which this titan of side-scrolling action would be built. Notably, this would be longtime Castlevania composer Michiru Amane's first work with the series before going on to create some of the most iconic video game music in history. She wasted no time here whatsoever, but we'll talk about this absolutely immaculate soundtrack a little later. From my cursory research, the game reviewed well but slowly faded into the background as all but the greatest games do. This review from Sega Magazine in 1994 scored the game especially well in the playability and sound categories, and scored it highly overall. That said, this layout causes me psychic damage every second that I have to look at it. 90s video game magazines were something else. At first showing, this game is very much what the team set out to create, a boilerplate side-scrolling action game that is exactly what you'd expect of a Castlevania game. When compared to Super Castlevania 4, there are tons of superficial and mechanical similarities with some updates, like the ability to jump while on stairs. The most notable feature of its existence is, well, its existence. Specifically, I mean the 90s-era Sega console that was home to the likes of Sonic the Hedgehog. When I tell people my favorite Castlevania game is Bloodlines, they look at me with a puppy-like head tilt and ask, which one is that? After I answer, the one on the Genesis, they inevitably respond, there was a Castlevania game on the Genesis? I end this interaction with a gentle pat on their head before I recite this entire script from memory, until they walk away or I black out. I'll leave it to your imagination, which happens more often. A unique feature for Bloodlines is that it features, why do I write like this, is that it features not only a whipping boy, no, a whipping man, no, a man with a whip. There's also a second playable character with different abilities. Not only can you slap leather at ghouls regular style, you can impale them with a mighty spear, Spanish style. John Morris says what would happen if Indiana Jones ran headfirst at supersonic speeds into an American football player. Importantly, this is the first time a non-Belmont has been armed with the titular and aptly named whip, Vampire Killer. While he doesn't look like or respond to the name Belmont, he definitely plays like one. He can whip stuff directly in front and upward at a 45-degree angle and can swing from platform to platform. This time, though, you aren't limited to suspiciously planted floating rings for whipward traversal. Virtually any surface can be swung from, making for a smorgasbord of platforming options, much to the speedrunner's delight. Unlike its contemporary Belmonts, however, John's whip has a hurt box slightly behind him that I had to unlearn to use when playing Super Castlevania 4 for this video. Gone too is the weird noodle whip technique, so no more accidentally going noodle mode and doing less damage than a normal whip attack and then getting plunged into mortal darkness when your target survives your gentle caress. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. The second character, Eric Lecard, is from Spain and has a last name. Weird. Don't hold his confusing European heritage against him, however. My man Eric knows how to thrust, and thrust well. Eric does less damage than his colleague John, but he moves more quickly and can spin his weapon to attack his rear or attack things above him. Instead of whip swinging, Eric's platforming ability is a pole vault directly upward after a brief vibrational meditation. Since the two characters have a lot of different movement capabilities, there's a lot of replayability here. As a general rule, John goes forward while Eric goes up. Whips and spears may excite you, but there are more ways to annihilate the undead outside of the toys you brought from home. Whipping and spearing single-flamed candles will dispense one of several sub-weapons that will help you disassemble even the crustiest Calcium Crusaders. Your sub-weapon attacks are limited by your gems, which come from whipping two-flamed candles. Historically, sub-weapon currency has confusingly come in the form of hearts, a symbol most video game likers associate with health, but Bloodlines has righted this wrong for the only time in the franchise's history, much to my confusion, when playing other games after this one having been my first. Each of the sub-weapons have a normal attack and a special attack used by pressing up before pressing the sub-weapon button. This consumes 5 gems instead of 1, but it unleashes a devastating souped-up version of the attack that has the additional effect of putting everything into slow motion. The axe is the best sub-weapon. In case there wasn't any doubt in your mind, nothing beats the stupid stack of dinosaur skulls quite as efficiently, and striking awkwardly placed enemies is magnitudes easier once you've mastered its graceful arc. Its super version sends a wave of spinning axes straight forward, negating entirely the need for the next sub-weapon, the boomerang. The bladed boomerang replaces the cross in this game as the weapon you want to use against distant enemies. While it is nice to see a more diverse representation of ideologies in Castlevania, I usually don't bother with the boomerang except for in a few specific instances. Its special attack sends 3 boomerangs oscillating and rotating towards your enemies, covering more area than the axes, but in a less reliable configuration. Last among the normal sub-weapons is the Holy Water. Don't pick up the Holy Water. It deals less damage than your main weapon and other sub-weapons and covers about the same area as your main weapon. Its super attack creates a bouncy, unpredictable flame that is the closest to useful the Holy Water gets, but I'd usually rather have nothing than have to remember it takes 2 Holy Water to kill something for every one of everything else. There is a 4th sub-weapon that is only obtainable alongside certain secrets or from attaining the highest level weapon upgrade. As you whip candles, like in other Castlevania games, you will find upgrades for your whip or spear that increases damage and range. Unlike other Castlevania games, Bloodline gives you access to a 3rd upgrade that also grants you a unique sub-weapon. After whipping 30 double flame candles, you can pick up this upgrade and get to murdering whole screens worth of bad guys for the low price of 8 gems. John's version of the special sub-weapon seeks out enemies and candles on screen for a brief period, latching onto them until they are destroyed, and Eric's unleashes a wave of time-annihilating spheres of fire that evaporate the Servants of Darkness. The catch here is that if you take any damage while you have the 3rd weapon upgrade and sub-weapon, it disappears until you can acquire it again. Only the best of the best will have the longest weapon and most powerful frame rate destroying screen cleaners. Then there's the Wall Flesh, a Castle Crasher's most delectable and essential secret. Mysteriously, there is an invincibility power-up in the 2nd screen of the 1st level that is largely useless, and that, to my knowledge, never appears in the game again. The final pickup is the rarely acquired Mirror, as the replacement for the iconic Rosary item, which clears the screen of all enemies. Since the Mirror is found only in specific candles and isn't a random drop, its utility is also suspect, if occasionally a relief if you know where they're hiding. Whip Candle, acquire Mirror, explode Fishmen. Bloodlines has a unique and vibrant visual style that is a little more intense than other contemporary titles in the franchise. The opening menu of the game sets a gruesome tone with dripping blood and exposed bone that carries with you on your journey across Europe. Exploding flaming corpses, gut-based projectiles, and brutal dismemberment awaited little Josh all those years ago. The sound effects go a long way to sell this visual style as well. Attacks have weighty, meaty connections with enemies thanks to the iconic chunk and wiggle of the Genesis sound chip. And then there's the music. The perfect music. There are 6 stages in Castlevania Bloodlines, each taking place in a different location across early 20th century World War I era Europe. This was a unique setting for Castlevania at the time, and it allowed for the expression of some enemy types reflective of the less medieval backdrop. We'll go level by level, and I will inundate your ears and eyes with the excellence that is Castlevania Bloodlines. Hello and welcome to Scenic Romania. This is exactly what it looks like here, and no, I haven't been. The first stage begins where the last Belmont left off, the ruins of Castle Dracula. The demonic dastard threatens to rise again, and it only makes sense to return to the source of the problem. Pressing forward into the familiar red halls of the castle, it appears to have long ago been abandoned by any civilized undead, and is now overrun with zombies, skeletons, this floating eye thing, fishmen, ghosts, and bats. Don't forget to break this wall chunk here on the second screen for a 50-50 shot at either a fully upgraded whip and subweapon, or 30 gems from this other strange pickup you won't encounter again in the game. This is the first point where your choice of character changes the path you take, though the difference is small. John must go downstairs and contend with the Innsmouth look, while Eric can vault freely upward to this ledge. The first stage is an excellent preview of the rest of what is to come, as it primes you for the main gameplay attraction Bloodlines has locked and loaded. Bosses! Each stage has at least one mid-boss and end-boss. The first mid-boss is a hellhound that breathes fire and whose piercing howl shatters windows and rains glass down upon you. To me, few retro games have such a resoundingly cool and effective introduction, so I'll let the moment speak for itself. The flash of lightning outside, the shattering glass, the tension of the movement, all punctuated finally by your dismembering strike to incapacitate it before you deliver a final killing blow. Then the level just continues. This set piece was merely an appetizer and a 15-ish course meal that is the myriad of boss encounters that we will find here. Moving on, you venture upwards into the torture rooms of Dracula's former abode. More one-off set pieces and familiar architecture keep us from regretting our choice to not be a Nintendo kid. A swinging blade pendulum here, a crumbling dragon bone bridge there. Don't miss this extra life. Our very first bone snake dragon thing is presented in very boss-like terms here, and its pattern changes based on what difficulty you select. Conveniently enough on expert, you can simply skip it. You eventually arrive in the husk of the Master's living quarters. The walk up the floating stairs is a calling card to Castlevania veterans, indicating that yes, this was where the final battle had to have taken place last time. Big moon, magic stairs, all the signs are here. All that remains at the Zenith is an animated suit of armor held together by pure malice. Armor Battler is an easy first test if a little bit unpredictable in its pattern. His introduction is so weighty and the mysterious and foreboding boss music kicks up, you hear it coming before you see it, creating that sense of terror that games of this era really had to work to evoke. Shatter the Metal Man and take his orb. It's time to get Mediterranean on these fools. Atlantis Shrine, Greece. The second stage of Bloodlines begins with a serene view of the setting sun against the sunken Grecian ruins, the gentle movement of water, a soothing background track, and muscle-clad, sword-strapped, horned bull people. Worry not, as here is where a quirk of the Bloodlines armory expresses its maximum usefulness. It takes 3 hits to kill a bull man, write that down, but they don't suffer much hit stun from your weapon. This means that if you try to kill your foe with 3 discrete attacks at close range, you leave yourself open to evisceration. But, whichever character you select, their weapon deals damage twice per swing if you press and hold the attack button. The whip and spear weapons possess a singular nuance not commonly found in the classic-style Castlevania games. There are weapon cancels in this game too, and you can use these super secret mechanics to add a layer of strategy to combat. Do you use the brief window before an attack to deal the most damage possible, or do you cancel your whip attacks while dodging to maximize speed and mobility? In any case, this bargain bin Minotaur is going back to the maze. The second screen is the first of several auto-scrolling stages in the middle portions of the game. Water begins to rise from below, so it is time to get your cardio in, Dr. Beefcake. On the expert difficulty, this portion adds ghosts to the mixture of enemies, and I hate them. Thankfully, one of the candles on the way up is just out of view, contains an extra life, creating a sort of impromptu checkpoint if your ascent is punctuated by Slimer here. In a continued display of excellence in environment design, we find the source of the rising water. This is the Water Mage, our mid-boss for the second stage. He doesn't attack, but instead will continue filling the stage with water while you try to slay him, teleporting behind you after each attack in a race against time. I, however, know what's up, and I learned that you can use the back portion of John's hurt box to trick the stupid wizard into staying in the corner. Suffer no sorcerer to live. He is slain in the water drains, but wait, more bosses, and this is a 2-parter. If you don't know about the glitch that despawns the first one, you must defeat 2 armored opponents with simple attack patterns but tremendously outsized damage output. I love these animations where the bad guys burst into flames and sink. It gives such a fun heft to the enemies. Now we descend once again, standing on sinking platforms as the ruins drain themselves of the Water Mage's gushy endeavor. I've done this stage so many times that I no longer have to think about which direction to move or which platform to take or when to throw axes to slay the Gorgon heads and bob onto the screen from either side. Getting struck by one of these is certain death by drowning. A little bit of light archaeology is now the only thing between us and the ending of the stage. Another standout piece of design for the era, you must fight these weird helmet guys while destroying priceless ancient history, giving the impression that this environment was not meant to be traversed by the likes of John or Eric. They must literally carve their way towards their goal, and it makes for a very holistic atmosphere. The world, the monsters, all of these are obstacles, not linear Green Hill-esque paths for you to overcome through force when necessary. As the last of the water descends and the mysterious boss flute cues, you are given time to reckon with the enormity of your final foe. Golem is so tall that his head isn't even visible, but as we learned on our way here, carving stone with a whip is very physically possible if you can't have your way from the outset. While Golem is too large to attack John or Eric directly, it instead chooses to use its physical girth to destroy the ceiling and rain sharp stones down onto them while stomping around recklessly. No foe stands much chance against the patient spear, however, and soon Golem is little more than a red-eyed manlet ripe for the plucking. Look at how the Golem rubs his eye when you hit it. He's like, oh, dang guys, not in the face, I'll tell Dad. Cut it out, go Eric, what the heck? Imagine his raised arm as a Terminator 2 reference. Another orb, another foe whipped into submission. The Leaning Tower of Pisa, Italy. Harpies. I hate harpies. These enemies require 2 hits to kill, and they operate in erratic arcs that will occasionally just rob you of a hard-earned superweapon. On the first screen, they are accompanied by yet more bullmen that are probably on vacation from Minos to hang out with their Italian harpy girlfriends. Like all Grecian vacationers to the early 20th century Pisa, they are armed with Doric columns, and they are extremely drunk. From here we take some stairs and unsuccessfully try to outrace the eye monsters, only to come upon another divergent path for John and Eric. Eric can't bridge the gap ahead, leaving him to vault upward to escape the harpy menace. John simply whips his way towards and subsequently through several mummies. Why are there mummies in Italy, you ask? Did they drive here, you ask? Are they associated with the short-lived 90s children's television program Mummies Alive, you ask? Are they the third wheel to the bullman and harpy dating situation? Who knows? These mummies are dead, and they're Italian now. There is no Egypt level where we're going, and the mummies only appear here in Pisa, Italy for the whole of the game. Mid-boss time, except it's just a slightly souped-up regular enemy that is as vulnerable to throwing axes as anything else. Also on vacation from Greece are the floating Gorgon Head sisters. They would like to speak to us about our car's warranty. Checkmate, Medusa. I don't have a car because I only play video games from 1994. This auto-scroller is responsible for many fatalities for newcomers, but there is another one-up candle for those who don't want to game over. The final auto-scrolling segment of this level is a test of endurance against rotating bone beasts. Throwing axe. Apply directly to the bone beast. The sense of dimensionality granted by the scrolling background, the rotating tower, and moving platforms lends an unexpected amount of scale to this level. The boss in charge here is called Gargoyle, and at the surprisingly narrow top of Pisa's now apparently straight standing tower, we do battle while it flies around us. The spinning of the platform implies a 3D space where the gargoyle can attack from any angle, even if it can only attack from left or right. Aggressive whipsmanship, like in real life, is rewarded here. Applying 45 degrees of leather pain to the gargoyle will cycle through its current phase to its next, until at last the crippled creature explodes excitingly over the Italian landmark with a haunting screech. The engine strains against its own sprite limits, but the slowdown gives a dramatic charm to the spectacle. Another day, another giant sparkling red orb. Let's get Germanic while the game gets serious. The Munitions Factory, Germany. On the 4th stage, the harpsichordian refrain of the music grants us a feeling of culmination, as if we are hot on Drax's heels and that our journey is nearly over. We charge the gate of the literal bomb factory armed only with weapons grade chutzpah and a dream. This is the first level of Bloodlines' difficult back half. The enemies become more durable, the platforming more challenging, the barrels more German. The quantity of enemies from the outset of the level gives the feeling of tearing through the front lines of a heavily guarded structure. Watch as I struggle to reach this secret area for a 1-up. I failed so much that I started to gaslight myself into believing the fully upgraded whip prevented whip swinging. After my embarrassingly painful break-in, we can consume the wall flesh. X marks the spot. Stage 4 is largely a platforming challenge with relatively simple boss encounters. One set piece takes us through an enormous engine of some kind before we enter vertically oriented throwbacks to Castlevania 3. Bloodlines is a very cinematic game for its time, giving a sense of perspective to the player's view, and adjustments in scale like this chain in the foreground. Including the reel from the beginning, we can feel as though we are watching a horror adventure film. Another jumping challenge is next, but this time it relies on our weight to even out the elevation of the next platform. Combined with the ghosts that chase you, this is a considerable danger and has culled many a life from my total over the years. A true master can attain a rhythm that allows them to whip the candles and gain additional resources as they progress. I, however, sit before you with my white belt tied incorrectly in shame. The mid-boss of stage 4 is just Frankenstein's monster with an energy whip and lightning powers that operates in a set pattern. I take a lot of damage here entirely due to my impatience, which is a lesson one could take from virtually all of Bloodlines' challenges. Think and memorize are the two main actions one takes when playing a classic Castlevania, and the Sega rendition is no different. Speaking of a need for patience, this room full of spinning grooved blades and motorcycle bugs will often cause first-time players to seethe if unprepared. Even worse, if you die in this room you start again without any sub-weapon but the holy water. The motor bugs travel along the ground, so one might assume the weapon to be a natural counter to them. In a demonstration of the power of spiritual belief generally, the water doesn't deal enough damage to kill them, which will get you hit and often knocked into the blades that do a massive amount of damage. Next, you are forced to observe and time your jumps carefully before whipping the flailing skeletons on each platform with extreme prejudice. If you're too slow, they will send old Johnny and Eric screaming into the fathomless abyss of German woodland below. And then our final battle in the Munitions factory is against Gear Steamer. He's a malevolent assembly of 3D cogs. This was a graphical marvel for the Genesis, and the character put into the boss's animations give it a real personality despite its lack of human features. We whip its central orb to shrink the machine until it expands, in a desperate final exhibition of its power. It stands no chance of victory before our orb thirst, and we press forward into the most terrifying environment yet. Alright, I apologize in advance, dear viewer, but we have to talk about the French. The Palace of Versailles, like many of the other places our pair of protagonists have visited, is a real location. This massive dwelling was originally a hunting lodge for royalty, but has evolved over the centuries to become a repository for most of the reasons I wake up screaming several times a week. To me, this is Bloodlines' toughest level, and its most interesting expression of level design philosophy. By the penultimate stage of the game, it expects you to have fully mastered both traversal and combat equally. Versailles is here to test your worthiness to kill the Count. We begin in the garden with the introduction of the hallucinogenic plants that reverse your controls. We will never see them again, but they are accompanied by otherwise mundane dangers. Then a trap, then a fountain of blood filled with unkillable skeletons. If you've been to France, you know this to be a common landscaping feature there. This is the only time the game gives us red skeletons, a staple of the series, but it's an artistic flourish to give their redness an explanation. Further ahead are the horrid plant things. The only thing worse than the harpies are the horrid plant things. They swoop with an erratic, oscillating arc, slashing with huge, scything talons. You might naturally think the solution is to time your approach, and you'd be mostly right, but the horrid plants know the mind of their enemy, and that enemy is you. Their heads are bombs that they can dislodge and launch if you stand too comfortably out of range. Your first time through this part of the stage will likely kill you, as you assault headlong through the gauntlet of chloro freaks. I have only recently learned that confidence, and specifically not fighting them, is the key to passing less scathed. Much like the first half of the introduction to the stage, the horrid plant things are not a combat puzzle, but a platforming one. They require 2 hits from your weapon to kill, which we see as a difficult prospect if one is trying to remain corporeal. This screen teaches you that you cannot break your momentum to consider the path forward carefully. You must press on and use your knowledge, most likely gained from several deaths, to overcome. But wait, it is a combat puzzle as well. I lied to you. The genius of the horrid plant thing gauntlet is that it rewards you for understanding either approach. The axe is difficult to land a blow with due to the enemy's speed, and holy water as usual solves none of our problems. But a well-placed boomerang attack used without hesitation will keep both their heads from launching and eliminate them in exactly 2 hits. Both approaches demand the same confidence and purpose required to not get exploded like some kind of chump. One approach tests whether or not you know the tool to proceed, the other how your enemy moves. Speaking of gauntlets, there is a sequel gauntlet of gauntleted suits of armor in the hallways of the palace. Giant chandeliers hang above the intended path, and they will destroy anything that is under them when they fall, friend or foe. Dueling the first few armors is no challenge for those initiated in the chandelier arts, but towards the end of this hallway you are sandwiched by a unique sword-wielding armor and more garden variety axe throwers. Here is a reenactment of what happens to me every time I have the audacity to think that damage boosting through him isn't the most prudent solution to this encounter. I do not know what this screen is trying to teach me other than a fear of pain. I died many times in these first 2 screens, and it began to take a toll on my sanity. I seek purpose in action, and for a brief moment I let the intrusive but factually true notion of this endeavor's pointlessness set in. In these moments when I wonder how I got here, I think of you. You know who you are. All of my self-loathing, my fear, I piled it all onto you and drove you away. Like the great philosopher Michael Jackson once said, that the universe could misspend one mote of its grace and bounty on a man like me, that it could place me here and now at the foot of so great an adoration, that is all the proof I need that no divine justice could possibly govern the great and empty heavens. The throne of the Lord sits empty. Bone Dragon Tower! Have you been slacking on learning the exact speeds of both your weapon and the dragon's fireball? Bone Towers are a little rhythm mini-game where you approach and attack their destructible fireballs until you can get the ossified Cretacean edifice into range. Then you must maintain that pattern, adjusted for distance, while you attack until one layer is destroyed and you go again. This room is a pass-fail course in humiliation, and look! It's in our field of study. If you know what to do, this room is a tedious button mash, but if you don't, it is half of your life bar. From here, the path divides for the 2 heroes again. As John, you can delve through the palace cellars, and as Eric, you can take the roof. Until making this video, I had only ever gotten this far with John, and I had not realized that Eric gets to face enemies entirely unique to this path. The dreaded flea men make their appearance on Eric's route, but they are considerably less devastating to your mortality than in some other games in this franchise. On John's route, he faces the obnoxious bomb-throwing bag fellows that sometimes chuck food at you. Thanks! Unthanks. Time to go up or down the tower with more rotational blast presses or flexing. Mini boss! Despite my foolishness here, this armor is as vulnerable as the rest to a little bit of the old razzle-dazzle. It is the precursor to a final hallway that was a hard stopping point for a younger, dumber me. Boss is meant to replicate that optical illusion of two faces pointing at one another or some other object depending on your focus. When the faces appear, they send blue DVD player screensavers to slay you, which you should destroy in short order. Then, when the faces disappear, you can strike the pillar to deal damage. I've memorized the positioning of the attacks, but without the benefit of things like object permanence, Tiny Josh simply chose a rapid and terrifying end. The stage's last boss is a haunting spectacle indeed. A floating white woman. Like all floating white women, she is actually a giant moth. This boss is called the Princess of Moss, which is a cool name even when you realize it is a misheard translation of heavily accented English. Dodge her pollen, keep her trapped in the corner, and you will have the 5th orb. The collection grows yet again. Castle Prosperpina? Prosperpino? Prosperpina. This is it, the final stage. There's something exciting about the game letting you know in explicit text that this is the final leg of your journey across Europe. This stage has my favorite track in the game as it blends all the elements of danger and hope. One must imagine filling the thoughts of the intrepid intruder standing before a blood-red moon and a tower of terror. I couldn't find any real locations under the name Prosperpina, but I cannot imagine the game deviating from its slavish adherence to historical accuracy. Your sprint towards New Castle Dracula is punctuated by a new and more threatening form of Gorgon head that, like the greatest rapper of all time, spits hot fire. Their valiant defense of their home is not enough, however, and they blow the bridge, sending you into the waters below to your doom. Roll credits. No, that would be a mercy. While Stage 5 is the hardest for me, Bloodlines still has such sights to show us. The game leading to the beginning of Stage 6 represents slightly over half my time with it, according to my footage. Dracula's evil is so potent that it bends reality itself, severing your vision into 4 misaligned pieces that will definitely reap at least one full continue from any newcomer to this screen. Memorization is your only help here, unless you are some kind of mind freak with preternatural spatial awareness, and the Gorgons have not yet given up their posts. Into the pit, you dastard. Next, you are upside down and your controls have been reversed, relative to your position to the floor. Up is now duck, but right is still forward. And you persist. Axe armors challenge your understanding of cardinal directions, and so do the glowing orbs of frustration. A long hallway full of sprinting clones of the Stage 1 boss await you, but your trigger finger is too whip-thirsty to be beat. The Grim Reaper, Death himself, counts among Dracula's servants. Pick a card. Any card. One may grant you a feast, but mostly this is just a boss gauntlet, Mega Man 3 style, replete with shorter, thankfully, shorter, life bars. Gargoyle, Gear Steamer, and the Mighty Golem all fall once more. This musty old skull for brains ought to come up with newer tricks if he wants to get our ghastly goat. Melee ensues. Death proves to be made of flesh after all, and the flesh is weak. More! Bosses, you cry! I hear you, dear viewer, and I have come to you with a sizzling armload. The Dracula's resurrector is Countess Elizabeth, who will proceed first into the form of a full-on Medusa, which can be beaten with clever spacing. Her second form is a tedious impossibility unless you catch on to her gimmick quickly. First she displays her orbs. Nice. Each time choosing a symbol corresponding to whatever magic she wishes to inflict upon you. I assure you that you absolutely cannot afford to find out what any of her spells do. Mostly they kill vampire hunters. After summoning the spheres, they begin to rotate and converge while Miss Liz unleashes fireballs and teleports to either side of the screen. With each strike, one orb will dissipate. If you are swift enough, you can crush every sphere before the spell resolves itself and begin the next phase with a different spell and more orbs. Your attacks only damage her when you stop her spell, so failure to stop this necessarily means no progress is made. But we're heroes, dear viewer, and no orb is greater than our mighty collection. We have done it. We have prevented Dracula's resurrection by slaying this would-be Herbert West. More lies! You keep letting me do it. Really, it's your fault. Strangely, the crescendo before our final battle against the many faces of Dracula is set to Simon's theme, reminding us of those whipsmen that have always tread this path. If you don't stop here to enjoy the track, you're missing out, because we only get a short walk before the nexus of infernal malice that is Bela Lugosi in the flesh. This rendition of Simon's theme is one of my favorite from across the franchise. It's got that real Genesis feel to it. Dance break! Here we are, coming full circle as light flashes in the background once again, and a storm of red-eyed bats coalesces into the shape of our most ancient foe, the Elderly. This fight is brief and simple, replicating the pace and mechanics of the very first Castlevania game. Slap the geriatric in the face with your weapon of choice until Dracula somehow gets even older. This form was unique in the series up until this point, would be unexpected to someone familiar with the patterns of the first game. Now, a Beceptored Lich, he will float around the screen summoning fireballs and columns of evil energy. His defeat is inevitable, and we are made to witness the dimension-deforming form. I wrote that. Can't believe I wrote that. His defeat is inevitable, and we are made to witness the dimension-deforming shape hidden behind the semi-human flesh he normally wears. The devil himself, dodging his rain of scythes, keeps slapping him into the corner so he can't break your rhythm and change his angle of attack. Over time, he will redden until his attacks become a spout of arcing flame. Keep your pace, and his flesh will be stripped away. Left without this flesh and impotent, your every attack will cause a shower of bones to rain down from his decaying body until at last you stand triumphant over the incarnation of evil. One last orb for the mantle. Enjoy those credits. You've earned them. Castlevania Bloodlines is not the hardest Castlevania game by far. In terms of approachability, I find it similar to Super Castlevania 4, which I played to gain some context for this video. The two games share many features and ideas, but I find the charm of the ultra-gory, bleeping, blooping Genesis game much more. I am, of course, biased, as few things have a hold over me like any video game I played between the age of 5 and around 14. But I like to think many might agree with me if they gave the game a shot. There are so many interesting ideas here that are never revisited within the confines of the game. Few enemies are repeated, almost no background elements are either. Each stage and each screen on those stages seems to be an expression of what the designers thought would be cool without any iteration or elaboration to follow. This old school style of game design doesn't fly now due to the broadness of video gaming's appeal, but back in the day, the devs just tried stuff until they ran out of time to make their game, and those timelines were short. Now games take much longer to create, demand much more from a person's time to complete, and have to accommodate a broader and broader subset of people. It makes sense now to show an idea, iterate, elaborate, and incorporate that concept as the game goes on until it lasts at the very end. You are interacting with all the game systems in unison. In Bloodlines, you'll encounter items, enemies, and ideas that will only be shown once before you have to move on, because there was simply no time to waste when technology and technique were improving so rapidly. It made sense then to make an entirely new game rather than reiterate under the confines of the same design. If modern game design is a gumbo of mixed ideas, Bloodlines is a sampler platter for what the future would bring, held together by a unique style and sound that hasn't quite been copied to this day. Check it out, it's a lot of fun. Thanks for watching.